Good evening and welcome to another webinar in the series Careers in History here at Cal State Fullerton. My name is Professor Volker Janssen, and tonight we want to talk about careers in nonprofits and outreach for history majors and history graduate students. So I want to first show you the plan, what we're going to do today. So let me find the proper buttons here. Let me first lay out our plan for tonight. I will introduce our panel members to you. They will introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their work, tell us a little bit about their experiences, then how they will talk about how they traveled from their college years to their careers, describe their work environment, and then we'll go into a discussion about our current BA and MA learning outcomes and learning goals, because this is one of the ways in which our students often struggle to make connections between the things that they learn in class, the things that they are asked to do on the job. We will hopefully have an opportunity to have you share some other important lessons and pieces of advice, and if we're lucky and people join us during this webinar, we will get to answer some questions. So I will move along and introduce you to our panel participants. We have with us today Raymond Ortiz, a former student at Cal State Fullerton, a student of mine, and currently employed in NGO work. We have Kim Gilmore, and a PhD from NYU. We sat together on a panel on prison history, I think in 2005 or so. We have Julia Caprizi with us. She's a field recruiter for the Peace Corps, and Christy Jones, a recruiter for Teach for America. I would like all of you to maybe introduce yourselves a little, tell us a little bit about the work that you do. Let's start from the right. Christy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Christy Jones and I am a recruiter for Teach for America. My current role encompasses managing our recruitment efforts for our Southern California campuses, and I absolutely love my job because I get to work with individuals that are focused on bringing equity to education. A little bit about my background is I actually, before coming to Teach for America, was an attorney, and I worked in the court system in East Los Angeles in the children's court, and kind of a roundabout way about how I got to my job, but I believe we'll be covering that shortly, so I will save that for later. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Julia.
Hi, I'm Julia Caprizi. I work for the Peace Corps full-time as a recruiter, mostly recruit at Cal State Fullerton and UCI. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in El Salvador right after I graduated from undergrad. Mm-hmm. And I later worked at a nonprofit. It was a boys' home in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And I worked at several other nonprofits afterwards. I later went back to graduate school. And now in my work, I get to work directly with students and help people to make some career decisions that they can also feel proud of and feel like they're making a difference in the world.
Great. Thank you, Julia. Kim.
Yes, hi, my name is Kim Gilmore. I work at History and A&E Networks. I'm a historian on staff there, which is not something that I ever set out to do when I first got started in my career in grad school at NYU studying history. But I will talk today about my path to my job. And I would say the biggest, if I could give a short description of what I do in my job, mm-hmm. It's taking history and making it available to a broader public through our television programming, through our websites, and through our partnerships with museums and historical organizations. So I'm excited to be part of this today, and also hear from the other panelists about how they got to where they are, and share some ideas about careers in the field.
Thank you, Kim. And I think we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about the difference between, say, trying to market the History Channel and A&D networks and creating other connections to your programming that is more along the lines of, say, outreach efforts, because that seems to be what you do a lot, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I can definitely talk about that.
Great. And finally, Raymond.
Hello, everybody. I'm Raymond Ortiz. I currently work for CCS Fundraising, which is a fundraising consulting firm for nonprofit organizations. I fell into that after graduate school. I had researched gender and sexuality and LGBT history, and then I began working with the LGBT Center of Orange County. And in my time there, I realized I liked the realm of nonprofits and that side of development. And what I like about this firm is being able to help nonprofits from behind the scenes and being part of the team that's able to raise the funds to keep these organizations open.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you guys so much. I want to ask you all to talk a little bit more about how much you enjoy your job. Now, most of our listeners and those who will watch this video later on will assume that working in NGOs or working in outreach or a nonprofit requires people that are pure of heart, do not want to make any money, and are willing to basically sacrifice themselves for a cause. While that might be part of your job, I'm sure there's a little bit more to it that gives you guys satisfaction in your career day to day. I'm going to have this go the other way around now and ask Raymond, what are the things that make your job fun on a day-to-day basis?
Well, for me, what was interesting was realizing that I didn't even know that fundraising was a thing, that development was a thing. I mean, it makes sense because they're nonprofits. So clearly something has to happen for them to raise the funds. And what I appreciate is being very hands-on, being, like I said, being part of that team that behind the scenes that keep the doors open. Mm-hmm. And I was a history major because I was very passionate about what I learned. And now I'm in a position where I'm able to take what I learned and apply it to greater causes and greater projects, and being part of, applying what I researched and the different organizations out there, seeing people turn their visions into realities.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Kim, what makes your job fun on a day-to-day basis?
I would say, for me, similar to what Ray said, that, just being able to work in the field every day in something that I never imagined. I didn't know that there would be a job like mine even out there. So that's a big part of it, working together with a team, and then, working with different kinds of teams, thinking in new ways about problems and problem solving. For instance, how do we start a new program? What should we focus on in the next 6 months? Those kinds of challenges. I really enjoy that. And then I would say just, working in a field where there are people who are constantly curious, both about history, but about learning and knowledge in general. And mm-hmm. that's something that I think is really fun, and that is a lot of the reason that I became interested in history in the first place, is just to learn more, to be around people who are interested in learning. So I'd say for me that those are the main things that really kind of keep me motivated and keep me interested in my job.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna do a follow-up questions for you, Raymond and Kim, because if any of our students were to see your business cards, they would either say, I have never heard of CCS, and so therefore this cannot be any good, or they will dismiss this as some sort of a corporate employment that cannot be intellectually challenging. Mm-hmm. And I want you to tell our listeners, how is this work still intellectually challenging? How are you still doing things that make you learn new things, that make you sort of really use your brain power?
I know for me that, what's fascinating is the different size of clients that we have and the different range. I mean, a 501c3 nonprofit, and 501c3 is how you register as a nonprofit. Some of our clients, they range from small private elementary schools to churches and temples to Habitat for Humanity and the Autry Museum. And our big one recently was the new National African American Museum. And to make, some of these campaigns to raise the money can be either for 4 million to 150 million. And for that caliber of work that takes, that planning that it takes, it's very critical, very detailed. And a lot goes into it because at the end of the day, it's people to people. And it's not an easy job. I mean, it's not hard in a sense where it's unfulfilling and not fun, but you have to definitely be the person who can handle that type of work because it's ongoing, and the smallest fault can either make or break the entire project.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Raymond. Kim, did you have a thought on how to maybe dispel people who, and I could think of, past fellow grad students who would, look down their noses on private sector employment, thinking that that's not the same intellectual challenge, but I believe it is.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there are all different ways of defining what is an intellectual challenge to people, and that for me, I find it that doing research on specific topics was definitely challenging, and I really loved that part of the history field. But what I do now is much more, I would say, like general, but every day I'm having to learn something about a topic that I might know a little bit, but not a lot about. So an example would be today, we're working on a short video about the history of Japanese American internment, which is a topic that, I've read about and know a little bit about, but in working with our short form team, I really had to kind of dive into that topic and really learn some new angles on it and think about how they might present it in a way that's compelling. So that for me was almost like a miniature research project that I was working on today. And so it's kind of something different every day. And I think that in all these different kinds of fields that we're representing here, there are those intellectual challenges that we have that might not be exactly like academic work, but that have some of the same characteristics.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Julia and Christy, you are here as recruiters, so I'm going to ask you to not tell me about, or tell us about how much fun it is to be recruiting, but how much fun it is to be working in your organizations. How much fun is it to be working with Greenpeace? What's the day-to-day challenge? How is this rewarding? I'm going to take you first, Julia. So
at Peace Corps, I really love my job.
Did I say Greenpeace, by the way? I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, working for Peace Corps is amazing. It actually was recently ranked as #2 in federal government for medium-sized agencies. And the reason that I know that it's amazing is because I've worked at places where it was not a good fit. And when you've had a job that is not fun and it's not a good fit, it's such a contrast to the alignment that you experience when you're in a position that feels right for you. So for me, I mean, this is fun because I'm surrounded by amazing people who are intelligent, who are caring, who are doing innovative work. Also because I have a level of autonomy in my work. So I work from home and I get to make a lot of the decisions about how I spend my time, what I dive deeper into, and I really appreciate that. And it's so much more interesting than being in a position where you're just kind of doing what someone tells you to complete.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to quickly summarize for the listeners what Peace Corps involvement would mean for them if they were to contact you?
Yes. So typically this is a good option for people who are just graduating from undergrad. This is an opportunity that can launch your career. We're in 65 developing countries and we work with all majors. So we work in all parts of the world as well, and you don't have to have a language going in. Peace Corps will pay for everything, your plane ticket to get there, a monthly stipend, and then help you to pay for grad school when you come back as well.
Oh, wow, fantastic. And it's for 2 years, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Christy, tell us what's good about working for Teach for America.
Absolutely. So I mentioned, like, I love working for Teach for America. I love our organization. To start off with a little background, we're an organization that works in 53 different regions across the United States, and we train and develop leaders from around college campuses to teach in a low-income community where we are seeing that equitable education is not happening. And like I mentioned, that's a 2-year term, very similar to Peace Corps, where we also will provide a full salary and benefits, but also help pay for grad school afterwards. A little bit of my experience, because I actually was one of those teachers in a classroom. One of the things I absolutely loved about working as that position before I came into recruiting, I taught 8th grade U.S. history and absolutely loved teaching history. But part of what makes this job so amazing is that you are around kids every day, and kids are just incredible. They make you laugh, they warm your heart, and they just have so much love to give. And so I think that was probably the most amazing part of working in my job, was just on the day-to-day, was being able to be around kids that were really wanting to have, a role model and have the passion for learning, and wanting to be leaders in their own communities, and to be able to cultivate that and push students towards success, I think was really one of the most amazing parts of my job.
Now, Teach for America is Wendy Kopp, your founder. Is she still active?
So she is no longer the CEO as of 2013, but she is still, yes, the founder, and is still very, very active in the Teach for America community.
Wendy Kopp modeled Teach for America on the Peace Corps. And looked at the Peace Corps as an organization that could be copied with an educational mission, specifically in the United States. And a lot of people mistake teaching in particularly challenged school districts and schools as some form of charitable work. But Teach for America is more than that, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up too, because we don't necessarily even see ourselves as charitable work, because I think that puts a negative connotation on the work that we do within communities. We really see ourselves as partners with communities, and wanting to work with the community to help build that community with that community's own members. We are trying to strive for equitable education, because we see nationwide that there are so many students that are falling so far behind. And, on average, students that are living in a low-income community tend to be about 3 years behind their peers in both reading and math. So we're trying to, provide that equity to make sure all students are having broadened educational opportunities. And aside from that, we do consider ourselves to be a leadership organization as well. We're able to really provide a launch pad for a career that is, high impact both inside and outside of the classroom.
You are, in your application process, you are fairly competitive, is that correct?
So we consider ourselves a selective organization and not necessarily competitive, because we don't necessarily have a limited number of spots, but we do have a high bar for admission, yes.
Julia, how difficult is it to get into the Peace Corps?
We are competitive, but the good news is that when you connect with a recruiter, that can really increase your chances of getting a spot in Peace Corps. And also, if people are flexible, if they're open to kind of seeing that whatever vision they have for the difference that they want to make, if they can imagine that in a variety of different places or in several different sectors, that can help a lot. And so one of the services that I provide to Cal State Fullerton students is to revise their resume, so that when they apply to Peace Corps, their resume is really showcasing all the great skills that we're looking for.
So one thing that we might want to do at the end of this webinar is to show your contact information? Would that be okay?
Of course, yeah, that would be great.
Okay, because if contacting a recruiter improves the chances to get into the Peace Corps, then I think we should allow the participants of this webinar to contact a recruiter. So with that said, let's go to your life stories. And I'm going to move from Christy upwards here with some of these questions. We don't have to take them one by one. We can sort of fly across them as your own life stories make sense. What I think we all want to know is what made you choose your major? What other things did you do and consider? And I think that's where Christy's a good starting point. And forgive me for that error here that I will quickly correct that typo here. So Christy, do you want to tell us how you got to your work? You said you were a lawyer before, an attorney.
Yes, definitely. And before I get too far, I do want to echo Julia's comments where actually meeting with a recruiter for Teach for America also increases your chances as well. And we also do resume review as well. So I'd be happy
Very good.
to
We'll have that included too then.
Too. Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I was an attorney prior to coming to Teach for America. In my undergraduate education, I actually was not a history major. I was criminal justice with a minor in psychology and forensic identification. And so I was considering and actually did work in a forensics lab for a while. I was encouraged to pursue law by one of my professors and decided to take that leap and ended up going to law school and practicing as an attorney for about 4 years. So I then had been really working in nonprofit work for most of my career. Prior to actually practicing as an attorney, I worked in higher education and knew that I really had a passion for working with students, and in particular first-generation college students and students that were looking to succeed, but maybe weren't necessarily given the skills in K through 12 education. And so that's really when I started to focus more on working more of a preventive measure by working with children and working kind of in that K through 12 setting. So I worked in children's court and I also worked in education law. And while I was in children's court and what led me to Teach for America was I actually noticed that the students in our court were facing a lot of discrimination and losing out on a lot of their educational time just by virtue of being involved in our court system. And so decided that as an attorney, I wasn't really doing as much as I could to prevent kids from ending up in the court system. And I knew that education was a pathway to opportunity. So decided to kind of jump ship on being an attorney and took a big risk by changing careers and came to Teach for America as what we call a core member, which is one of our teachers that teaches in our regions across the nation. As I mentioned, I taught 8th grade U.S. history and really just absolutely fell in love with education as a pathway. Wasn't intending necessarily to stay in education full time, but then because of my experience, definitely decided this was the way that I wanted to make an impact on society. So that's how I got involved with Teach for America. And because of my experience in the classroom and seeing the need for talented and incredible teachers, I came to my current role as a recruiter.
It sounds, I think, I could imagine it, this being a bit of a surprise for many listeners, because being an attorney sounds like an accomplished career position from which to build further up into law. And yet it seems that you looked at the children that you were facing in court thinking that you really ought to be in their lives earlier before they even get into court.
Absolutely. I realized I was working as an attorney, I was working more on rehabilitation versus prevention. And so that's why I decided to make the switch into education as more of a preventive measure from, preventing kids from going down that path to begin with. So that's kind of why I made the switch.
That was a bold step, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. But it's definitely one that I have never really looked back from. I find my current career and the work that our organization does to be extremely fulfilling. And from the work that I saw in my own classroom, I know that we can be highly effective in providing kids with opportunities and really kind of providing those educational opportunities for their future. And so it just became ultimately more rewarding to work in that prevention side.
Thank you, Christy. Julia, what was your major, and how did you end up staying with the Peace Corps full time?
Well, my major was communication. I had considered social work, psychology, and I later got a master's in public administration. I actually did not stay with Peace Corps. I left Peace Corps twice. I first served as a volunteer in El Salvador from 2002 to 2004. I was a health outreach volunteer, and I worked with women. I formed a women's cooperative that made baskets and embroideries, and I helped them to market them. I also taught reproductive health education in a 6th grade classroom, and I loved the work that I did when I was a Peace Corps volunteer, and again, felt like it was an opportunity to really be immersed. I learned so much, and yet I was able to make a difference in the world at a young age, and so I really valued that.
Mm-hmm.
It was a transformative experience for me, and it kind of set the foundation for everything I've done after. My Peace Corps El Salvador experience changed my perspective. So I mentioned in my introduction that I had worked at a residential boys' home. That was my first professional job after Peace Corps service. I was there for 3 years, and it was a great opportunity. But after a while, I was looking for something different. I wanted to be challenged, and I wanted to break out of the mold that I was kind of getting in a rut with my work. So I just asked myself, where might I be able to find that feeling of being invigorated and working for something that I'm excited about. So I looked on the Peace Corps website. There was an opening. I applied, and it felt like my application went into a black hole. It felt like no one read it. Nothing was happening. So 2 or 3 months passed, and they actually called me and interviewed me, and that's when I became a recruiter. 3 years later, I left that job to go to graduate school full time, and a lot of my master's degree was paid for at USC, and that's what was the reason for moving across the country from Chicago to the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And after graduate school, well, I actually was able to do an internship at the State Department in Bolivia. That was an unpaid internship that I did while I was in graduate school. Another amazing opportunity, a chance to really see a whole other part of the world, another way of kind of behind the scenes, a different type of work. And then ultimately, after working at a couple of nonprofits, after I graduated from grad school, I came back to Peace Corps because it's just something that I truly believe in and something that I've loved, and it's been an amazing part of my life. So I think it's irresistible to be able to do something that you love and also get paid for it and also be able to make a difference.
I agree. I when I hear your stories in both of your cases, and not to sound cheesy, but it really stresses the importance of understanding career as a journey with a lot of surprises and unexpected turns. For many of our students, I think that's the scary bit, and I think many would like to know exactly where they're going to go and pursue that plan and end up there. And all your amazing experiences were really not all that planned. I mean, the Peace Corps initially, of course, was planned on your end, Julia. But in the end, it seemed like there was a lot of change that happened because you were observing what happened around you and you made new decisions. I think, Kim, you can speak to this surprise of making a different decision. I know you chose history as your major. What made you choose history, and how did you end up at History Channel and A&E Networks?
Yeah, sure. Well, I would say first, as an undergrad, I was an American Studies major, so I always had an interest in history and also popular culture and literature, the way all of those things converge. So I moved to New York after I graduated from college to do an internship at a magazine, and the kind of foundation of the internship was fact checking. And so, you know, as interns, we and this definitely dates me. This was before the internet. So a big part of our job as fact checkers was to call people who had written the articles and kind of talk through their sources with them, and when possible to you know, have backup and additional sources that could confirm the facts and figures that were in the article. So I ended up fact checking an article that was about 3 strikes laws. This was like around the time of mandatory minimum sentencing, when those laws kind of took off. And the article was written by a professor who was a historian at NYU. And I had at that time definitely thought that I wanted to pursue grad school in history, but I kind of didn't know even like what the best path was to take. And I think something I definitely didn't know is that you had to have a pretty good sense of the topic that you wanted to work on before you went to graduate school. So I ended up talking to the professor who wrote the article, who encouraged me to apply to NYU. And he, you know, it kind of sparked in me an interest in that topic in general, and kind of putting a history behind the rise of mass incarceration in the United States. And that ended up becoming my topic in graduate school. And when I was at you know, at NYU, I had a lot of other part-time jobs on the side. I worked in the library. I worked doing fact-checking at different magazines. And so I saw a position posted, this is toward the end of grad school when we did have the internet, on a listserv that was for a part-time job at the History Channel, doing some research and writing for you know, more popular audiences. And so I just applied to that job from the listserv. I didn't know anyone who worked there, and I did kind of have the preconceived notion that you talked about earlier, that was, you know, a very commercial kind of job. Was I really going to like that? And is that really what I, you know, was working on this degree for? But I ended up, you know, applying for the job, being interviewed and starting. And I found that I really liked I really liked the writing for like kind of a broad audience, and also thinking about how to make history accessible to a broader public. And so I found that without even expecting it, I ended up really loving working there. And I actually was part-time there for a few years until, you know, I finished my degree, and it turned out the timing was right that my department was able to hire a full-time person. So I ended up, you know, becoming that full-time person, but I hadn't planned on it. I thought for, you know, the whole time that it was going to end up being a part-time job, and that I was going to go on the academic job market and stuff like that. So definitely can relate to what you said about, you know, there are all different ways that people end up where they are or end up in certain careers, and like just keeping an open-minded perspective on what might end up being an interesting position, because even if there's a job that doesn't seem like the ideal job, sometimes it opens doors or it leads you to people or experiences that end up being really positive.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been in touch over the years, and I feel when I see the work that you do, that in many ways you're still teaching.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, teaching in different ways, like some of what I do is talking to people who do programming for our networks who might not have a history background. They may have like a television background. They might not know a lot about history, so I'm recommending things for them to read, and then I end up learning a lot from them too. So it's kind of a give and take. And I definitely think that in everybody's job, there is some amount of teaching that you do and some amount of learning, and that it's really a give and take of, you know, kind of keeping open to what you can share with others, but also what you can learn along the way that might help you kind of be better at your job, or just be a more well-rounded person in general.
Raymond, why did you get into history, and how did you end up at the position that you're in right now?
I picked history, honestly, right out of high school. It was the only subject that I really liked, but I had no idea what I wanted to do with it. I just knew that I liked it. So I continued into Cal State Fullerton. That was what I picked right away to major in. And the interest was there. You know, it waned a bit during my undergrad, and I think a lot of that is because during that time you're taking all these classes that you're required to, but they're not necessarily what the subject of history that you want to focus on. And I didn't finally have that chance to until like my final year, when you're taking your senior capstone courses, and you have that bit more of freedom to pick the subject matter, to, you know, basically pick whatever you want to focus on. And for me, I was at that point still where, again, I was already 4 years after, at the end of that time. And I'm like, well, I still don't really have an idea what I want to do. But I know that I have finally began to like really fall in love with history. And I felt that it was just getting good and I wasn't ready to be done yet. So I continued into the graduate program, and I right away knew what I wanted to focus on. As I previously said, was gender and sexuality, and right away I just ran with that, and I continued in that and focused and took as many courses as I could, and it opened the opportunity for me to really find what I'm passionate about, find the subject matter. And so now at the end of grad school, it was about, what do I want to do with it? And I originally planned on going into a PhD program, and that was what I focused on for my 2.5 years in graduate school. And for me, I really loved academia, and I loved the value of it. So when it came time to go visit the schools, and this was after I was accepted, I was there and I realized this isn't the path for me. You know, it wasn't anything negative. I just realized that I wanted something different. And so from that, it was that, you know, I don't have any regrets about that. But what comes with it is also that, well, I spent so many years working to this point, and now I have to begin from scratch in a sense. And so for me, it was very much, okay, here I am, here's what I'm passionate about. So instead of me continuing on for degrees that I may or may not need, I need to go try using what I have first. And I immediately immersed myself with the LGBT Center of Orange County and began working with them. And from there, I was able to apply what I researched, what my focuses were over the years, to greater projects, to greater causes. And that's what turned me on to the side of development. And from there, from the center, I went to CCS.
Now, Raymond, the thing that still is in the minds of many of my colleagues who have had you in class is all the stuff that you did outside of your coursework. I mean, you were a good student, to be sure, but I think what really set you apart was your activism outside of your regular coursework. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that has something to do with the way you chose your path, don't you think?
Absolutely. And that's something I realized later on, that one of the projects I take a lot of pride in and my time at Cal State Fullerton was that I founded the Cultural and Public History Association. And I'm a very no-nonsense person. And over time, I mean, I get kind of bored easily, and I like to be more hands-on and being the one to lead a lot. And so I saw that there was something missing in our department, in the CSUF history department, and that was representation for cultural historians, public historians, and oral historians. And so I just surrounded myself with a few other peers who felt the same way and began an association. And we had no idea what we were doing. I mean, I sure didn't, but I thought it was a great challenge, a great opportunity. And we began with a club of 5 people. And within 2 years, we have over 50 members. One of our events was featured on USA Today. And then in my final year, we decided to launch our own publication, our own journal. And that was something else I think I realized I kind of like development and fundraising, because journals just don't happen. Journals are super expensive. And we wanted this to become a reality, so we had to make it happen. Yeah. And that's what I enjoyed the most.
That's what I like about your story, and why I am so happy that you're with us, because there's a lot of there are students who like to write, read, and ponder, but there are also those who are really itching to do something and get something off the ground and create something, if not necessarily by their hands, then certainly by their intellect, their willingness to put out a flyer, organize a conference, get the room and the catering to have a speaker, and these kind of basic requirements to get something to happen on campus. That was really noticeable with you, and I would assume that the reason you got your job had as much to do with your extracurricular work as with your curricular work.
Absolutely. When I interviewed for my current position, I had my resume, I had my CV, I was ready to go, I had my references, and they probably spent about a good 5 minutes on that. And then the rest of the time, they asked me to speak on my experience with the club. And when they asked me to bring any sample work, I just brought in the history journals and showed them what I'm capable of. And looking back, it makes sense that I ended up on this path, because part of being in that club for over 2 years was I got a lot of fulfillment by helping other students turn their visions into realities, helping them turn their paper into a bigger presentation or a bigger panel. A lot of our officers and stuff, they use the opportunity to showcase their work, which is fine. That's part of the experience. But for me, it's like I had a lot more fulfillment by helping others turn their smaller projects into something bigger that would otherwise be lost, that wouldn't be recognized.
And when I think about it, I can see this desire or this joy in making something happen with all of you. I mean, Christy decided to turn her back on the court and then a career as an attorney because she wanted to make a difference in children's lives. Julia wants to connect people to the Peace Corps, knowing what a good opportunity this is. And Kim spent years making things happen with the History Channel and A&E networks while also working as a student. I think in all of your stories there is the desire to work with a team and to get an organization moving forward. I think that's one of the things that students need to recognize in themselves if they want to choose a job. Is that something that appeals to them? Then they need to choose their careers accordingly as well, I think. Okay, let's go to our next question, the work environment. I wonder whether, and this I think applies maybe more to you, Raymond and Kim, as historians, are you sort of outliers in your work environment? Whoever wants to go first.
Well, I'll take the, sorry. I would say, yes, I'm definitely, there are not a lot of history majors where I work, which is kind of interesting because we have a lot of history. We do have a lot of history majors who apply for internships and who become part of the office. But I would say that I work at A&E Networks, so History Channel is just one part of the company, and so I work with people that have a variety of different backgrounds. But even on the History Channel side, most of the people there, because our core is TV programming. So it's a lot more people that have media. There are many more people who have a media background. But there are definitely, I'd say that most people do have a curiosity about history and an interest in history. And they tend to follow to a degree what is going on in the history world.
Do you have to often re-educate people about what it means to be an historian?
I would say sometimes I kind of talk a little bit about the fundamentals of, the ideas of change over time and about context and historical specificity and that kind of stuff. But I would say that, a lot of our programming is really like focused on specific topics that we talk, our executive producers spend a lot of time working with historians who are experts in a specific field. So a lot of what I do in my job is recommending people who really know subject areas that are specific, say about certain kinds of aviation history, or we're doing a new show about knights, all different kinds of topics and fields. So part of my job is recommending experts for them to talk to get more information. So, and I think that's part of what I've learned in my job is knowing what I don't know. So I can't pretend to be an expert on all fields or all areas of history. So helping people find those who do know about certain subject areas is a big job.
Raymond, your history degree, is that an outlier? Is that an odd thing in your company? And did they look at you with some surprise?
Yes and no. I know in terms of like the actual logistics of it all, that it doesn't say, you are required to have a BA and or an MA or above in history for whatever the position is. So when I came in, it was definitely having to sell my degree, and very much the same as what Kim said, is knowing what I don't know, but also focusing on what I do know and what I can bring to the table. And so it was definitely like, okay, well, I'm coming into a consulting firm that's different from the field of history right off the bat. But then I realized that of our team of 17 people, that maybe about 3 of them actually have their degrees in business or business fundraising. I mean, one of my teammates has her PhD in history as well, and also got her BA and MA in it. There's another one with her BA in history. There's a few in psychology and one in political science and one in English. And what I saw in common is the humanities. And I see a value in that because, and I think that's what the firm also sees as well, because in terms of doing the actual job of fundraising, that you can be trained to do. But at the end of the day, it's a people-to-people job. And our clients, these organizations, for the most part, in one form or another, they're all the humanities. And it takes a person who can value that, who can understand that and have that passion for it to really take it to the next level and the quality of work that you produce. And I think that was the value that they saw in hiring me, because I do care about this. I mean, this is the field that I picked when I was in college, and now I'm able to translate that into something better, into skill sets.
Yeah. Raymond, you said something really important, that there are things that are required on the job that you can learn, that are skills, but there are other things that you really sort of need your higher education degree for, and that's, I think, the stuff that you learn in the humanities. This is something I've been going over and over again in these webinars, that there's something about the training in the humanities that is the kind of stuff that you don't necessarily learn on the job. I wanted to ask Julia and Christy, what kind of skills, what kind of abilities do you expect from Peace Corps or Teach for America applicants that are not necessarily these practical skills, such as, well, I'm not a practical person, so I'm running out of examples here. But what are the things that students learn in history or in the humanities that you appreciate for applicants in your organizations?
Well, I can talk to that, and I bet that a lot of what I say will also probably apply to Teach for America. We look for flexibility. We look for people who are curious and are kind of dialed into details around them and are able to change accordingly. So make observations and take in new information, maybe change gears. Mm-hmm. Looking for people who are able to be compassionate and demonstrate an interest in human beings and able to listen. I think those are some of the top things that I would say.
Can I follow up with you and ask a question? Because I lived in Belize in 1994, and I had a good number of American friends that were Peace Corps, and they gave me the impression that what was needed from Peace Corps volunteers overseas were practical skills, the kind of things that they could apply, say, to help out a remote village, restore its water supply. Is that still an important aspect of the Peace Corps, or has that maybe changed a little bit?
Both, yes. Both things are true. Yes, it's still an important aspect, and yes, it's changed substantially. So for instance, I had a degree in communication, and I served as a health volunteer. The reason I was able to serve as a health volunteer is that it's those kind of hard skills that it takes to be a health volunteer you can be trained in that. So during the first 3 months of Peace Corps service, everyone goes through training. It's language training, cultural training, and technical skills. So in order to, the question is kind of twofold, because one, you're asking what does it take to get selected, and two, you're asking what does it take to be a successful volunteer on the ground. And so to be successful on the ground, I think it goes back to some of those soft skills that I initially mentioned. But to be selected, a lot of it goes to what Raymond was talking about as well, that you want to demonstrate some actual life experience. You want to demonstrate some leadership, some involvement in student orgs, or if that's maybe paid experience, whatever it might be, in a certain area. So a lot of times those of us who have a liberal arts background, the way the entry into Peace Corps service is through either teaching, having some English tutoring experience, or maybe having had some health promotion experience similar to the stuff that Raymond had did. And then also, if you happen to have grown up on a farm or you had agriculture experience, that's welcome as well, but that's not as common. So it is kind of both, but I think it's also shifted over the years to kind of encompass all majors.
But it sounds like one could possibly get into the Peace Corps. Let's say Raymond could enter the Peace Corps, and in the process also learn additional new practical skills.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
I think that's exciting. It makes me want to go back and be a Peace Corps volunteer.
Yes,
or Teach for America. Christy, what are the kind of things that people need to bring in for Teach for America, and what is it that they can learn on the job?
Yes, absolutely. And Julia, you said a lot of what we look for as well. I would say one of the and actually, before I even get into what we look for, one of our number one majors that we recruit from are history majors. We do accept, which is wonderful. We do accept all majors and backgrounds, but history is one of, in the humanities more broadly, are some of the majors that we do recruit very highly in. Coming into Teach for America, we do look for people that have leadership ability that have like proven that they can achieve in a variety of different settings. We look for people that have analytical skills because we want people to be able to step into a classroom and be able to, see that multiple different students need multiple different things, and you can drive results for multiple different students. We also look for people, and this is one reason why I find history majors to be really compelling applicants, is that we look for people that can look at different perspectives and have a respect for diverse experiences and opinions, particularly because we do work in very diverse communities. And so that's a really highly regarded skill for Teach for America, is the ability to see multiple perspectives and work kind of, across lines of difference and collaboratively with others.
Mm-hmm.
As far as in coming into Teach for America and succeeding there and what you'll gain, we actually teach all of the skills needed to be an effective teacher. You do not need to come to Teach for America with teaching experience, because those are skills that we do actively train for. We do have a lot of people that, around 65% of our Teach for America core members stay in the classroom, but we do have a lot of people that go outside of the classroom after their time with Teach for America that really credit our leadership development and the skills that they gain with our program toward their success in their current careers. And so a lot of that has to do with the skills that they gain as far as building relationships. It's a very necessary skill with students, but as you could imagine, if for somebody going on to med school, it's a very necessary skill with doctors as well, with their patients.
Mm-hmm.
Data analysis, that's something that we actually use very heavily in teaching. The ability to see multiple perspectives I talked about, but you're also gaining that cultural responsiveness that complements that ability to see multiple perspectives. We do offer a lot of professional development around leadership to really position our core members to lead in the future. And so we do foster a lot of leadership development. And so that's another thing that core members tend to get out of their time with Teach for America.
The last thing that you mentioned about leadership is really important, because I came across this in a book recently on leadership that focused on Wendy Kopp, your founder that I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really striking how the Peace Corps, as well as Teach for America, is one of those organizations that create some of the most remarkable leaders that then later find themselves as fellow alumni of Teach for America in higher echelons of government or business. The book that I read, I think, mentioned that half of the leadership of the Washington, D.C. school district were Teach for America alumni.
Yep.
And at some universities, Teach for America is a clearly recognized building block in developing leadership skills. For example, in 2005, 1 in 8 Yale graduates actually applied for Teach for America.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an opportunity to make a difference, and it's also an opportunity to learn the skills to make bigger differences in the future. You also gave us a good segue into our next topic, and that is a discussion of the kind of things that history students learn in the BA and in the MA, and you said that history students were the largest group of applicants for Teach for America. So I want you all to take a look at these goals and think about ways in which this might actually apply in your job, in your position, and for Julia and Christy, of course, for people in the Peace Corps, people volunteering in Teach for America, how any of these particular skills come in handy. And maybe you have specific examples from your own experience or from your own observations.
Volkner, one thing that you said really resonated with me, and that's that I was a first-generation college student, and my experience in Peace Corps, the 2 years, it was almost 2.5 years, it created me into a leader. I didn't realize that I was a leader prior to doing that experience. I didn't know how much how much power I had to make a positive impact in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that was the skill that was the most salient. And I think that's probably the biggest walk away that most people who do a program like Teach for America or like Peace Corps, they end up really understanding what is their capacity and being able to implement that in their next opportunity.
Great, fantastic.
Julia, I love so much that you said that, because that was my experience as well. In like, I know that I had been involved in things prior to Teach for America, and I imagine Peace Corps is very similar, where, it really just sets the path for your leadership and sets the path that you are, then your trajectory essentially. And I think that that's so insightful.
Thank you. So whoever sees anything here that they can connect to their work experience, what they observe around themselves on the job, please go ahead.
I know for me that I rely heavily on research and analysis in all senses, because in order to do the projects that we do to raise the funding that these organizations need, I mean, it's very detailed, and that in itself is something that I learned from being a history major, is having that eye for detail. When it comes to the research and analysis, that falls in every realm, from the beginning when you need to learn about the organization, their history, how they got to where they are today in general as an organization, but also looking at how their funding programs got to where they are today. And then from there, once you are engaged in a project, now being able to research the different donors out there, who are their prospects, what are their background, and to compile reports on them and, in their capacity to give to a project. And then, and this is like summing up a project that can either take 3 months, 6 months, a year, over a year. But at the tail end of whatever CCS is hired to do, you have to compile a formal report. And that's something that I'm very well versed at from being a history major, is being able to produce what could easily be a 25-page report to 60 or 80 pages that breaks down the analysis that was done over the course of that project, that is able to present an argument, to present reasoning whether the campaign to raise X amount is doable, and what's the plan to do it, or if it's not doable and why, and what the organization has to do in order to set themselves up to possibly do in 2 or 3 years. And so, but at the end of the day, you have to have that detail. You have to be able to understand what to look for when you are doing research and analysis, and you have to be able to do it in a short turnaround time, but that doesn't reflect as if it was done in a short turnaround time.
Mm-hmm. Kim, I could imagine that a number of these skills here are required from you on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the historical themes here are important in my job, but one thing I was really noticing is that a lot of these things, you could even take out the historical parts of them, and these are really essential skills in any kind of job, which is, oral and written communication, critical thinking, the ability to analyze, the ability to research. I think that these are all kind of fundamentally important skills regardless of what kind of field you're in. So that to me is like another kind of reminder of the value of a history major, regardless of what kind of career that you're going to pursue. You gain these fundamental skills that can be useful in a variety of different kinds of jobs.
Mm-hmm. Kim, do you think that and Julia, I don't mean to disparage your degree now, that a communications major or an English major or a liberal studies major would basically offer the same strengths here as a history major?
Oh, were you asking me?
Yes.
Oh, I would say that I think that in general, a rigorous liberal arts education will offer a lot of these things. I think that some of the things that are particular to historical inquiry about change over time, about mastering a certain kind of subject matter are particular to the field. But I think that you could do a similar thing in literature and in other kinds of fields. I think, to me, it's really about mastering a body of knowledge and building the skills that that are prized in that field.
Mm-hmm. I think about this a lot when I talk to students about the strength of history, and we end up distilling these essential skills about the power of intellectual inquiry, critical thinking, communication skills. And then I often think in my head, well, that none of this really makes necessarily a case for history. What I think history does very well, not exclusively, not on its own, but I think it does it very well, is to expand our imagination about what is a human experience and what kind of things are possible. I think this is where the thrill of teaching, maybe the thrill of filmmaking comes in for you, Kim, where you can show just unbelievable stories about how some human beings have lived, have prospered, have thought in ways that today, for many of us, is completely inconceivable.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true, and I think that's kind of a through line of history that many people find fascinating, is the contours of human experience, how people have lived, how people have defined their own lives, and how they've become actors who have made change during certain moments in time. So I definitely think that storytelling is a big part of history and a big part of what is appealing about it. And, one of the reasons that people who describe being lifelong fans of history, people who may or may not have been history majors, they're attracted to those same things about the field too.
Mm-hmm. I think, Christy, you mentioned something like this earlier on as well about the strength of history applicants in Teach for America, and that is the sensitivity to the very diverse experiences and senses of self and identity that the history major can teach very well. I'm not going to say stronger or better than any other degree, but I think certainly history majors can draw on maybe historical metaphors to be more open-minded about the things that they encounter.
Yes, absolutely. And I definitely see that as being a trend as well, in that our history majors, they are able to understand those multiple perspectives from having studied multiple perspectives in their history study. So it's definitely something I see as a real strength in our history applicants, in addition to everything that's listed here, like intellectual inquiry, critical thinking, analysis. Like, these are all skills that we actively seek out. Specifically communication as well. I see that listed a couple times. Mm-hmm. Communication is really a strong skill that we look for as well. So but yes, coming back to your original point, the ability to understand multiple perspectives is a really valued aspect of being admitted to Teach for America.
Now, we're sort of approaching our final lessons here. I have a question for you about the relationship between your career and historical thinking or historical knowledge. On the one hand, I wonder whether you, because of your historical knowledge and historical thinking skills, and this applies now more to Raymond and Kim, think of your career differently, or whether you think of your own position in historical terms. And I wonder, maybe Julie and Christy as well look at their own work, their own organizations, as something specific in our history. Has that ever occurred to you, that thought? That you sort of historicize yourself, your place, and your organization?
Well, this is Kim. I would say that yes, I think that historical thinking people tend to apply whenever you're thinking about a narrative or about a story or about an arc or about, a set of plot points. We often think of our own lives in those terms. Mm-hmm. And but I tend to like also apply them. I try to apply the principles of history not just in my own life but like in the world around us. So right now we're living through what many people feel like is a historic time in terms of politics and government. But one of the impulses that we always have, I think, as historians, is to say we are in the middle of a moment, and to be able to understand the full context, we need time, or we need perspective and that kind of thing. And I think that's true of like the moments that we're living in, and also for our own lives, that sometimes we can be informed by our love of history, but I think that it's hard to fully apply those principles to our own lives because we're living through them in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Raymond, Julia, Christy, do you see yourself in historical moment? Do you see your own organizations as doing something that sort of has a place in history?
I think so. And I know for me, being one of the few history majors in the firm that I work for, is that does present an upper hand in a sense, because with understanding your place, or just in general, historical knowledge and historical thinking, what comes with that is just a passion for history, and for having a respect for history, but also how you research it, how you write it, and how you present it. And that's something that I noticed, in working for a firm that I do, is that a lot of people don't necessarily have that. And they come in to their client side, they do their job, and they do great work and stuff, but they clock in and clock out. And there's no broader respect or an understanding of what these organizations do, and having that sense of care and looking at that bigger picture of what, you're part of something bigger. The organization is going to be part of something bigger. In terms of CCS and the work that we do, you're setting them up to be able to sustain themselves for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, however long it is. And that's going to be a bigger impact. And that's something that I value. And I know that my employers value in me, is that I'm able to see that bigger picture and to have that broader respect and passion for it. And I know that a lot of people, unless you come from the humanities or you have a personal interest and passion for it, you don't necessarily see that a lot.
Julia and Christy, do you have thoughts on this? Do you see your organizations as claiming a place in history? Or we can also turn this around and say, what do you see as the future of your organizations?
I think it's so interesting that you mentioned our place within history. And I think earlier you mentioned reading a book by Wendy Kopp, and that book is actually titled A Chance to Make History. So it's very interesting, because I think we absolutely see ourselves as creators of, our future, but also like part of this historical movement where we're kind of on the precipice of education going one way or another. And particularly like in the current educational climate, we see a lot of decisions being made about students that are, oppressive decisions. And so we're really looking to create transformational change for students in public education. And so we do absolutely see ourselves part of this history where we are changing the face of public education, and we are looking to create not just change within education, but societal change as well. And believing that we can do that by mobilizing leaders at this root cause of education. And so I definitely see us as part of a historical change.
Great, thank you.
I would agree as well. We're currently in Peace Corps Week, which is the celebration of Peace Corps historically starting on the steps of the University of Michigan in 1961. And so this is 56 years of Peace Corps service. And like you mentioned earlier, Teach for America was molded on the idea of Peace Corps, and AmeriCorps was as well. And we have multiple world leaders, including presidents, who have attributed their success in different countries throughout the world to having had a Peace Corps volunteer when they were coming up, when they were learning, when they were younger, that was something that very directly impacted them, according to them. And so I think, going back to John F. Kennedy and decades of this service, I think Peace Corps serves a role that's very unique in the world. And I don't know of anything else that does what Peace Corps does. It's also it has a very simple mission as well. It's really just an intercultural exchange and also delivering technical skills to countries that have requested our assistance.
Yeah.
That's simple.
Yeah. I'm thinking that a lot of students that right now cannot imagine what else to do with a history degree other than to teach. Upon reflection, they might conclude that the reason they want to teach is not necessarily because they want to stand in front of people and talk, which is not the same as teaching, but because they want to make a difference. They want to maybe encounter children at the beginning of a school year and see them walk out of the class at the end of the school year being different, being somewhat transformed, having learned something. And I think this idea of making a difference, I can see this in all your work. I can see this in the outreach that Kim is doing with History Channel and A&E Networks as another avenue, another channel, indeed, for teaching. Raymond in making other nonprofit efforts possible through fundraising, and for Julia and Christy, of course, in delivering help and talented teachers to the places where they're needed. What advice and recommendations would you give to history majors and MA graduates who want to make a difference through outreach or nonprofit and NGO work when they go out and look for a job?
I can start. This is Julia. I would say that it's important to maintain an open mind and recognize that you can't control everything that's going to happen in your career or in your life moving forward. So stay open and flexible and be willing to do something that maybe isn't your version of what you thought was perfect for your particular path. Because if you have that attitude, you may surprise yourself, and you might find something for yourself that's even a better fit than what you had originally imagined. So I think that's super important, and just be ready to learn and evolve and make connections as you go.
To add to that, which I thought was fantastic, I will say that for those graduating with their MAs, and I had this experience with myself and also my peers a lot, where you have to be a bit more humble and understand that just because you have this higher degree, that you're not going to get the $60,000-$70,000 job right off the bat. You have to put in your time. You have to make yourself available, and you need to sacrifice a bit. I was right off the bat after grad school working retail and volunteering 3 days a week, 4 days a week at the LGBT center. That was unpaid work, and staying positive that it'll turn into something. And from there, I found the opportunity with CCS. And even then, when I began for the first 7 to 8 months, it was 20 hours a week. It was part-time, and I was just the assistant at the time. And after that, then they promoted me to full-time, and then they added on the title of project coordinator. And it was a very humbling experience, because I was able to show myself that this is what I'm passionate about, that I'm willing to put in this extra time, go above and beyond, and to make what I want to do a reality. There wasn't anybody that was going to hand it to me. I didn't have the experience, point blank. With what I did in grad school and with the work that I had done outside of school, it still wasn't enough, or it wasn't enough in the correct channel. I had to balance it out. And so, you have to kind of swallow that pride a bit. And I think that's something that a lot of people, at least from what I encountered, experience and feel, where I have a master's now. I'm going to go get this full-time salary with full benefit job right off the bat, and that's not a reality. And it's okay to take your time to figure it out, because all that will come with time. But you need to be able to be open to that, have that open mind, and enjoy the experience as well.
Thank you, Raymond. I think that's very true, and it's not something that students necessarily want to hear, but they do need to know that sometimes they have to still enter at a very low level. They will work their way up, and they will reach higher, as is the Cal State Fullerton motto. In case you don't know, Titans reach higher. And in terms of lifetime earnings, I think the data actually suggests that humanities graduates, such as historians, do quite well over the course of their life. But do they enter a high-paying job upon graduation, like maybe the graduate of a Harvard Business or Harvard Law School? No, they don't. Any other advice?
I think I had a few things based on what others have said. And first, one, being flexible, keeping your options open as far as, the different opportunities that you're pursuing, because you actually never know, like, the person that is part of your job that maybe isn't your ideal is a pathway to a job that is. And so definitely keeping your networks active, keeping your options open, and also knowing, and I think this has been something that has resonated throughout this webinar, that what you end up doing your first job, or the pathway that you end up pursuing, and I'm kind of living testament to this, is not necessarily where you have to be stuck. From somebody that, practiced law for 4 years and did law school, like devoted 7 years of my life to pursuing the law school pathway in law. I completely transformed careers into something that made me happy. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the first job you take defines your career. And so I think that going into, because it can be really scary to switch careers, but going into it with that open mind and with the knowledge that it will be okay is something that I think is really valuable, and a lesson I wish I had known earlier.
Thank you, Christy. Kim, any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say I definitely agree with everything said about, being open, realizing that it's going to take time to find something that's really a fit. And, to that, I would say also that it's okay to take a job that doesn't seem like the perfect job at a given time, and just get in and start working, start seeing what you like, what meeting people and stuff like that. It can be a great pathway. And then for people who are interested in a career in the history field, there's some great organizations out there that aggregate job listings, such as the AASLH, the American Association for State and Local History, the National Council for Public History, and a bunch of other organizations like that. So I think that, like, the research skills that you learn being a history major, you can definitely apply those research skills to looking for a job. I'm often surprised by how I meet people who are interested in history fields and they haven't really Googled jobs in history. And, and I definitely think that, like, one pathway can lead to another in terms of just looking to see what's out there. And then as you start to research and look at different kinds of jobs, you become more aware. And, just a kind of basic things like LinkedIn is incredibly helpful. And I know like a lot of students are on LinkedIn now, but and joining and like signing up for daily like the History News Network and other information sources in the field. I think that anything that you can do to increase your knowledge about what's out there can be helpful.
Great.
Can I just jump back in really quick?
Yes, please.
Kim said. Kim mentioned really briefly about like making sure like your LinkedIn is active, and just going off of that. I know myself and several other organizations, about 75%, if not more, of our recruiting comes from LinkedIn. And so that's actually a really great resource if you're trying to promote yourself and also like have that online presence, not just with LinkedIn, but other social media sites as well. And having like that online representation of yourself is really helpful, not just for recruiters looking at you, but for you to be able to showcase all of your talents. So Kim, I'm so glad that you brought that up.
Yes, and I admit that that is very important. I personally have always been sort of averse to something like Facebook and LinkedIn, but then I've had the privilege of not having had to use this. I agree with your general advice that connections are important. I always add to that students should think of networking as productive relationships and not schmoozing, and making sure that when they maintain relationships in order to facilitate future employment opportunities, that these are relationships that have some form of substance other than simply exchanging flattery. Because a lot of students believe that that is actually what networking is, sort of maintaining a smile and standing there ready to market your skills.
Well, yeah, and I would say that also don't be afraid to reach out to people. Like, I think if you go to an event and you get somebody's business card, definitely drop them a note. I think I always like it when I meet people and then we're able to stay in touch. And specifically, if they have interests or questions that they want to ask, I think that a lot of people in the fields of history and education and nonprofits are definitely people who like to share their experiences, and never hesitate, I think, to reach out to somebody and even just say, it was great to meet you, and I learned something from you, or just something like that. Those connections can be really helpful.
Great, thank you. That gets us to our final page here. Julia and Christy, I took the liberty of adding your email contacts here since you are recruiters. And I'm hoping that our students in the future will look at this webinar and learn the many lessons that you offered here. I wish we had a bigger audience, or at least an audience, to be able to field some questions right now. That is not the case for reasons beyond our control. But I want to thank you all so much for taking the time to talk with me about this and to offer our students your advice and your recommendations and encouragements. Thank you for being here tonight. And if you have anything else to add, now is the time.
Thank you for organizing this.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent, guys. Have a good night, and maybe I'll see you around sometime soon. Take care.
Definitely.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.